And how can the UK best get what we want? How can the UK ensure its safety, political and financial safety in the future? Now, I've done a few videos on our population decline, and I've done a few videos on how I believe government needs to reassess its green revolution. But the more books I read on this political nature, the more I realize that the country really needs a clear plan on how we're going to bring the country forward. At the moment, anybody who lives in the UK knows that the Conservatives are on their way out, and the Labour government have smelt the blood in the water and now, puffing their chests out and saying, look at me, we're the next best party. And when you listen to these political leaders talk, they never ever talk about a plan for the country. They talk about a plan for the people. Vote for us and we'll cut taxes, or vote for us and we'll make sure the NHS stands. Vote for us and we won't sell the NHS to the next person. Vote for us and, children will get more childcare. And some of these aspects are very important. If anybody watched my demographic video the other day where I said we have to start encouraging families to have children, we need to focus on what the country needs. The country needs a healthy population, and the country needs a population of people raising children and continuing the cycle. We need consumers, and we need a lot of consumers in order to keep our industrial complex alive. But at the same time, there are so many areas that we can improve to make the country more financially secure and less dependent on the international market. The United Kingdom has always been a powerhouse. We had the Commonwealth, we were we're the smallest island in the world, yet we had the biggest amount of land in the world. Now, we have built massive amounts of relationships with those countries over the past decades. Some positive, some negative. And we need to continue to try and build good relationships with those countries, because ultimately we're all going to need each other. The UK is severely exposed to a world where globalization would crumble, especially now that we've left the European Union and we're not protected within that trade bloc. We have to build relationships with other countries and with our fellow countrymen of the European Union to make sure that we get all the resources we need to ensure life in the UK continues to the standard we have always wanted. Governments need to start thinking about the country first. The people are a product of the country. And we need to start thinking about the country as a living, breathing entity that needs to be encouraged and motivated. If people don't have a plan, they don't get anywhere in life. We've seen that time and time again, that if you don't have a plan for your future, if you don't sit and make a goal list or a to-do list, or even just a plan of where you want to get to in the future, even if it's just a savings plan or an education plan or career plan, everybody who makes a plan generally outperforms those who don't. And it's the same for the organizations in our country. Let's say you work for a company and that company is making pressure transducers or widgets or whatever you want to think about it. The product isn't important. But as long as that company has a vision that you want to work to, the company's vision is to produce the best quality component at the lowest possible cost, to ensure that all workers within the company have equal opportunity and can achieve the successes of their labor, a company that wants employees to feel like they're an important part of the company, a company who wants their employees to have great benefits and salary remunerations for the services that they carry out. These are the types of things we expect. Now, when it comes to our political parties, we don't ever seem to get that. Wouldn't it be 10 times better if our governments had a vision for the future? Like, imagine the UK, imagine your political party, and it doesn't really matter at this stage whether you're a Conservative or a Labour. I feel both parties particularly handle this really badly. And for me personally, both parties have too much history, and it really could do with a rebrand. So imagine a government stood up in front of you and said, we as the UK government, or the future UK government, we want to prioritise our policies to ensure that the country is as economically competitive in whichever sector we want to focus. So let's, for argument's sake, we know at the moment we have an energy crisis in the UK. Energy bills are extremely high, and they don't need to be extremely high because we have so many natural resources in the country at our disposal that can create cheap energy. Now, for argument's sake, imagine you're a government and you were talking about energy and you were saying, we're going to produce the cheapest, most environmentally friendly energy possible. However, the priority is to ensure that energy is as cheap as possible to ensure our economy and all the economies that it will feed can flourish. That's the primary, is to create the cheap energy. The secondary is to create environmentally friendly energy. With that cheap energy, industry can go and make various widgets or produce various amounts of food or produce anything. And if it's cheap energy, it'll be cost effective. The second thing a government should be saying is, we are a strong, proud international nation. We have a bustling international community that have called our country our home. And we will continuously strive to ensure that everybody in the country is represented. However, when it comes to national security and our position on the global stage, the country and the country's needs will always take priority. So we're sending a clear message to the world that the UK is one of the most proudest nations in the world. We will continuously try and help every nation in the world. However, when it comes to our requirements, we will absolutely do what is needed to make sure we get what we need at the price we want. That takes commitment on several parts. It takes commitment from our politicians on the international stage, and they have to be looking outward and speaking to other countries and other parts. But at the same time, it also means that we have to invest in our military and keep our military as strong as possible. Because ultimately, a strong nation with a strong military has a bigger bargaining chip than a weak nation with a weak military. Now, I'm not saying to become warmongers. That's not what I'm saying. The military is there as a bargaining chip. You sign a treaty of defense with so-and-so, they sign a treaty of X, Y, and Z with us. And that is how commerce has happened since the dawn of time. That is how NATO became so powerful. And now NATO is at the point where there's pretty much no power in the world that could come against NATO. Even Russia and China with their vast militaries would very much struggle against NATO. And NATO should continuously grow, because ultimately if everybody's in partnership, that's the world in a much safer, stable place. But there are many other countries that we can do this with if we have a strong military presence. And being the island that we are, our navy needs to be our strongest military presence. Our government should be prioritizing innovation and technology. We should be ensuring that businesses are doing what they can to make as much industry and as much high-tech industry that is unique to our country as possible, so we can sell it on to other nations. Ultimately, the more we produce that is unique to our country, the more we can sell to other countries. We need to focus more on emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, as well as the areas artificial intelligence and fintech, as well as the areas that we excel at already, finance, manufacturing, engineering. In order for a government to really get the best out of a nation, it needs to make the most important priority is educating that nation. And that means the UK government should be pushing forward plans on how they're going to increase the education of our country, or how they're going to increase the importance of education for all. We need to start thinking about what's important for not just ourselves, but for our country too. And the more we achieve for our country, and the further we get, and the more we can generate, the national pride that we used to have, the better. And we're never going to achieve that if we focus on all the negative parts of life in the UK. I mean, I could sit here right now and I could say, yeah, the NHS is pretty bad. Or we can say, right, we love the NHS, and as a nation we really want free healthcare. That is one of the fundamental cornerstones of being British. How can we get both? And somebody needs to come up with a plan. And the plan might not be what we want to hear, but it might be the best way to improve the quality of the healthcare that we get. It's the same with education. We could say that, education in the UK is substandard. But the question is, why is it substandard? Because it's not a shortage of money. When you look at the money that the UK spends on education and healthcare, it's probably one of the highest numbers in the world. So there's no excuse for it to be substandard. It's the way we manage it. It's the way things have always been done, and it's that status quo that sometimes needs to change. As we evolve and as we learn as a nation, as a people, we need to accept what's good and what's bad, and we need to make those changes. But we can't make those changes unless we're open to the conversation to make those changes. And this is my objective with everything I do on this show, is to say what I'm thinking, and then hopefully get some people to watch it and say what they think. And I have no problem being called out and saying, this is, delusional fantasy, or this is, never going to happen because X, Y, and Z. Because I like to understand why people believe it could never get better, or why we allow it not to get better. Simple prejudices like, I would never vote for this party because my parents would never vote. This party is too far left for me. I want something more in the center. Or this party is too far right for me. But at the same time, the left and the right is a swinging pendulum. Me, I'm 40 years old now, and through my entire life, I've swung from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. As I had children and as I became more of an adult, I started swinging more and more to the right-hand side, because with responsibility, success, you start worrying more about the right-hand side aspects than the left-hand side aspect. If you're not very successful, or you're having a harder life, or you're not focused on, the future, or you're not financially successful or safe, you start focusing on the left-hand side, and you start focusing on, we should get more for free, or there's too many people out there that have got too much and I haven't got enough. And a lot of the time, it's our decision. It's not the politician's fault we're not successful. I can sit and tell a story about the time I immigrated to the UK with £500 in a backpack, 20 years ago. And I worked hard and I persevered, and I got knocked down a few times, and I picked myself back up, and I ended up having a very nice life. But nobody gave that to me on a platter. I had to work very hard for everything and I had to fight at times to keep it. But there's a lot of people that have never tried to step out of their comfort zone. They've never gone, I'm going to create a YouTube channel just because I feel like there's something I can contribute to the world. People need to always put themselves out there, and they need to think about how they can make the world a better place. And sometimes it's a really small step. It might just be our small local location around us, our children, our next door neighbors, our parents, somebody at work. But sometimes we can do things that can help on a bigger scale. In order to get to those points, in order to get there, it requires work and sacrifice. And you have to be prepared to break a few eggs along the way, or make a few mistakes, or pick up a few enemies, or whatever the case is. Because life doesn't change, and the country doesn't change, and people don't change. But we want change, and we want things to get better, and we have to be prepared to change. We have to learn and educate ourselves. And everything that I've done on this experience, reading the one book a week, and then taking that book and then breaking it down into sections, and then trying to research how those sections affect my life and my country, and then trying to sit down and communicate with people who maybe aren't interested in reading but have 10 minutes to watch a YouTube video to say what I've learned, or what I think, and potentially change their minds to go, oh, hang on a minute, yeah, maybe we should look into this. And then they look into it, and then they find something new. Then they might call me on my bullshit and say, well, that was factually wrong what you found out the other day. This is what I found out. And then we can have a discussion about the situation. Maybe even one day have a podcast with somebody in the room. We can discuss something on a philosophical level, or an intellectual level, or an economics level, or a political level, from different points of view, from different aspects, from different times in people's lives. And this is what I believe will make the change. Because it's all very well to say, I get it all the time. You're white, you're privileged. I've had no privilege in my life. I've had no white privilege. I'm a 40-year-old white male. I'm heterosexual. I have a wife. I have children. But I've had no privilege. I've fought for everything I've got in my life. I left South Africa under black economic empowerment, where, white young males couldn't get apprenticeships because we were white young males. I've experienced oppression just the same as other nations have. And yes, I came to the UK and I found a job, and at the same time, my very first job in the UK, I earned £5 less an hour than everybody else. And that was because I was an immigrant. So the locals earned more than me. I earned less than them. I was more skilled than them. And I was doing the same, if not more work, because I needed the money, because I had no family to fall back on. But I did that for a year. And then I found a company that would pay me the equal money. And then I left. And I continuously climbed and learned and jumped and changed, evolved my entire life. But I've had no special treat. Don't let my whiteness fool you. Don't let my maleness fool you. I've had no special treatment in my life. And I've known plenty successful people who aren't white males. And they've never had any special treatment, but they've worked just as hard. And this is the point that I'm trying to get across, is a nation that works together, that accepts our unique differences. Everybody's always going to have their own prejudices. Prejudices are prejudices. I don't like a lot of things that go on in the world. And for the most part, I just keep my opinions to myself, because I don't need spread negativity. When I come on here, I try and spread only positivity, or I try and identify a problem that we can solve. And sometimes what I say might not sound positive, but it's not negatively aimed towards anybody. I don't like to sit and blame political parties for failing, because I believe the job they do is incredibly hard. I do agree that there's certain elements of life that cause some of the problems, like government intervening in the free market system. So capitalism on its own only has one customer, only has their customers at heart. Because if you don't service your customer in true capitalism, in a true free, if you don't satisfy your customer will go somewhere else. However, when government intervenes in the capitalistic system, in the free market system, and pumps money in unnecessarily, or allows certain industries to flourish, but not through pure commerce, this is where the grey line comes. And this is why in America, the big businesses invest in the government to make sure that policies and laws are passed to favor business. their specific industry. But imagine government didn't pass any of those. Government didn't involve themselves in industry. The capitalistic system would be purely focused on satisfying its customers and giving its customers the best quality products. Now, I'm not saying there's not going to be a few bad eggs, but what I'm saying is consumers are intelligent people. I'm not going to buy a product that's rubbish just because it's there. I only buy things that I think are excellent, that I feel like are worthy of my hard-earned money being spent on. And imagine a government that didn't interfere in business. Imagine a government that didn't interfere in education apart from signing the checks. Imagine a government that didn't interfere in the health service, but underwrote a national insurance policy that made sure every person in the country was insured and got very high standard of healthcare. But the businesses, the doctors and the surgeons and all that, were private businesses. They had to attract customers to get that money from the government. They didn't just get given. What would the service look like? You think about your corner shop, and there might be 3 corner shops within a kilometer from your house. But you always go to a specific corner shop because that corner shop gives you a specific level of service. They might be more pleasant. They might always have the brand you like. They might have whatever. They've learned what their customer wants and they give their customer what they need. Every industry would be the same, especially without government interventionism. And these are the small changes that the country could start to make the country better. If you watch my video the other day that I did on UK food security, you would see that the country manufactures only 52% of its food. That means there's a potential to grow our economy, internal economy, by 48% in the food market. And I think the UK food market is something like 100 billion. So if we're only keeping 50% of it, there's another 50 billion to bring into the UK economy. When you think that Europe is one of our biggest trading partners, and the only difference between Europe producing our food and us producing our own food is cheap energy, then you start seeing the reason, well, why don't we get these cheap energies in place so we can start producing more of our own, becoming food secure. And once we are food secure, we can export the surplus. And then our country is trading from a position of power. We'll always need to import resources. We have very few resources. We'll need to import things like phosphorus for our fertilizer, and there's always things that'll need to be imported. If we can produce as much as of the finished products ourselves, it would be much better. And I'm just going to finish with this. As the world changes and as other countries, just the same as Britain, start looking inwards to solve their problems, there is great opportunities for the people of those countries to rise up and solve those problems. If you feel like you have a particular set of skills, or you feel like you have a particularly good idea, it is your responsibility to make that idea into something. And it might start off small, and you might build yourself up, and you might take a few knocks along the way, and you might even face bankruptcy once or twice. But if you keep moving forward and you keep learning from your mistakes and you keep trying and you keep changing things and you keep researching and you keep trying to understand the problem, sooner or later you will succeed. Only failure is stopping. Only failure is quitting. Only failure is never starting at all. And if we could start getting our children to see the world like this, rather than being afraid of things going wrong, rather than being afraid of saying the wrong thing, rather teach our children to ask those difficult questions without fear of being told off. Get our children to think about being ambitious. Tell our children that their lives could be 10 times better than our lives if they did X, Y, and Z. Tell them the mistakes that we've made and be honest. Stop blaming other people for our mistakes. Stop blaming government for your shortcomings. Stop blaming other people for being rich and you not. Stop blaming the fact that the boomers have got all the money right now and we haven't. The secret is to figure out how to get that money. The secret is to figure out how to achieve that. Every generation works for the next generation. And right now we're looking to our millennials to consume and raise the next generation. And our boomers are getting to the point where they retire and they're going to liquidate all their assets and live off their wealth. Our job is to attract that wealth for the next generation. Or as adults, our primary job is to have children and keep our population strong and growing. And for those of us that don't have national pride, we need to find out where it's gone and we need to find areas where we can build it up again. And again, it could start right from your own little street, your own cul-de-sac. But national pride and pride in our beautiful country is what will get us through any struggle and any hardship. So until next time, take care.